picture this. You're a farmer digging a well back in 1974
Hmm.
near Xi'an in China.
Okay.
Your shovel hits something hard,
Uh-oh.
but it's not a rock.
What is it?
It's terracotta.
Wow.
And as you keep digging, you unearth a life-sized human head.
That's incredible.
Now, you've mentioned how you like to get to the bottom of things quickly.
Yeah, I do.
So let's dive right into this discovery.
Right.
Because that moment right there, that's when we first got a glimpse of one of the most incredible archaeological finds
Really?
of the last century.
What is it?
The Terracotta Army of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China.
The Terracotta Army. Huh.
Yeah,
So what we're talking about here is a way to see into the mind of a ruler from over 2,000 years ago.
exactly.
And it goes way beyond just burying treasure with him.
Right.
It was all about showing off his power,
Mm-hmm.
making sure everyone knew he was still in charge, even after death.
And that's exactly what we're going to do for you in this deep dive.
I like-
We know you want knowledge that's fast and thorough, but not too overwhelming.
Makes sense.
So we've gone through excerpts from the Wikipedia page on the Terracotta Army.
Okay.
And we've got a simple mission to understand why and how this massive silent army was created
Right.
and what it can tell us about the first emperor himself.
It sounds like a great mission to me.
So we're talking about an entire army crafted from clay
Wow.
and buried with him sometime around 200 to 209 BCE.
210 to 209 BCE.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Can you imagine the sheer scale of that?
That's a long time ago.
It is.
And to think that something this huge could stay hidden for so long,
Right.
only to be found by pure chance.
It's mind-blowing.
Tell me about these farmers who made the discovery.
Well, there were these local farmers, Yang Zifa and his 5 brothers.
A lot of brothers.
They were, along with their neighbor, Wang Puzi,
Okay.
and they were just trying to dig a well.
Digging a well.
Yeah.
That's how it all started.
It is, and they were doing it in Lintong County, which is east of Xi'an. East of Xi'an.
Yeah. A region known for its underground water.
Interesting.
But it wasn't like there were absolutely no clues before this.
Oh, so there were signs.
And for centuries, people had occasionally found little pieces,
Like what?
like fragments of terracotta roof tiles, things like that.
Huh, almost like whispers of something bigger hidden below.
Yeah, exactly.
So these small finds, were they documented or anything?
They were noted, but they didn't really prepare anyone for the sheer scale of what was lying beneath.
I can imagine.
And once the farmers made their discovery, Chinese archaeologists stepped in right away.
Makes sense.
And what they uncovered was the largest collection of pottery figures ever found.
Wow, that's something.
It really is.
So what happened next?
Well, they built a museum complex right there on the site.
Oh, wow.
And the biggest pit is now covered by a roofed structure to protect it.
So people can actually go and see it.
You got it.
Amazing.
And here's the thing. This army is just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
Okay, what do you mean?
We're talking about a necropolis that sprawls across an estimated 98 square kilometers.
That's massive.
That's like a whole city devoted to the afterlife.
You could say that.
It's incredible.
It is. And the planning, the symbolism, it's mind-blowing.
Tell me more about that.
Well, they designed it to be like a mirror image of the emperor's imperial palace.
Like his own palace in the afterlife.
Exactly. It had
Oh.
offices, halls, stables, even an imperial park surrounding the central tomb mound.
They thought of everything.
They did, and to really make it feel separate from the world, they built 2 rammed earth walls with gateway entrances.
So wait, what are rammed earth walls?
They're walls made by compacting layers of earth.
Oh, okay, I get it.
And all of this has been buried under up to 5 meters of reddish sandy soil.
5 meters.
Yeah.
For over 2,000 years.
I know, it makes you wonder what else might be hidden there.
It really does.
Right.
So they've uncovered the Terracotta Army, but what about the emperor's tomb itself?
That's a great question.
Have they opened it? Actually, no. His tomb remains unopened.
Why is that?
Well, it's a sealed space, estimated at 100 by 75 meters.
That's huge.
It is. And there are concerns about preservation.
I see.
It's not as simple as just digging things up.
Right. We need to be able to preserve what we find.
Exactly. And the Terracotta Army showed us just how delicate these things can be.
You're talking about the painted surfaces.
Yeah, the lacquer on the figures can deteriorate really quickly when exposed to the dry air and Xi'an.
How quickly are we talking?
Well, it can curl in just 15 seconds
15 seconds.
and flake off in as little as 4 minutes.
Wow, that's fast.
So you can see why they're being extremely cautious with the main tomb.
Absolutely.
So this incredible army that's been unearthed, it's only part of the whole picture.
It's just a glimpse into this vast complex.
Exactly. Now let's talk about these pits where they found the army.
Okay.
There are 4 main ones, all about 7 meters deep,
Just 7 meters.
and about a mile east of the burial mound.
Okay.
And the direction these soldiers are facing, that's really significant.
How so?
They're all facing east.
East.
Yeah, and historians believe that's intentional.
Why would they face them east?
Well, the east was where the conquered states were.
Oh, I see.
So it's like the army is symbolically guarding the emperor from any threats from that direction, even in the afterlife.
That's really interesting.
Isn't it?
It is. Tell me more about these pits.
Well, Pit 1, that's the biggest one.
The one everyone pictures.
Yeah, exactly. It's
That
the one that probably comes to mind when you think of the Terracotta Army.
Okay, so how big is it?
It's huge. It stretches 230 meters long and 62 meters wide.
230 by 62.
That's right.
Wow.
And it houses the main army.
How many figures are we talking?
Over 3,000.
3,000.
And they're all arranged in 11 parallel corridors.
Corridors.
Yeah, and these corridors were paved with bricks and originally had wooden ceilings.
So like an underground hallway filled with soldiers,
You got it.
just for the emperor's afterlife.
That's a pretty powerful image.
It is.
Now, what about the other pits?
Okay, tell me about the...
Pit 2 has a more diverse group of soldiers.
Like what?
Cavalry infantry war chariots.
Sounds like a full-fledged military unit.
It does. Archaeologists think it was like a military guard for the emperor.
I see. And what about Pit 3?
Pit 3 is smaller, and it seems to have been a command post.
A command post!
Yeah, with high-ranking officers and another war chariot.
So they had a whole command structure down there.
They did.
That's amazing. What about Pit 4?
Pit 4 is the strange one. It's empty.
Empty.
Yeah.
What do you think that means?
Well, archaeologists are still debating that.
Interesting.
Maybe it was unfinished, or maybe they left it empty for a reason we don't understand yet.
A mystery for the ages.
It is. And there's something else you should know about these pits.
Go on.
There's evidence of destruction, fire damage, and a lot of the weapons are missing.
So something happened to them after they were buried.
That's right. And it seems to line up with historical accounts that suggest the pits were looted by Shang Yu.
Who was Shang Yu?
He was a major player in the power struggles after the first emperor died.
I see.
And they think the fire caused the roof to collapse, which is why the figures had to be restored from so many pieces.
It's incredible that they were able to put them back together.
It really is.
So it wasn't just soldiers down there, was it?
No, it wasn't. Other pits have revealed a much more detailed picture of what the imperial court was like.
Like what?
Well, they found bronze carriages, terracotta figures of entertainers like acrobats and strongmen officials, suits of stone armor.
Wow.
And they even found burial sites for horses and some rare animals.
That's amazing.
And there's more. They found bronze cranes and ducks in what seems to have been an underground park.
An underground park.
Yeah, it's like they tried to create a whole world down there for the emperor.
They really did think of everything.
Now let's talk about the stars of the show. The warrior figures themselves.
Okay.
They're life-sized, some even taller, and it's often said that each one is unique.
Is that true?
Well, the figures do range in height from about 175 to 2 meters tall.
175 to 2 meters.
The officers are usually taller. Their height, their uniform, their hairstyle, it all varies according to their rank.
So there is a hierarchy even in death.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. What about their faces?
Scholars have identified about 10 base facial molds that were used.
10 base molds.
Yeah, but after the initial molding, they added clay to give each face individual features.
So there's a base, but then they personalized each one.
Exactly. So while there are some similarities, you get the feeling that you're looking at a vast army of distinct individuals.
That's incredible.
It is. And they're not all the same type of soldier either.
Oh, tell me about the different types.
You've got infantry cavalry archers, a whole military structure represented in clay.
Wow, take me through it.
You've got armored and unarmored infantry cavalrymen with those pillbox hats.
Pillbox hats.
Yeah, and then there are the helmeted charioteers who have even more armor for protection.
Okay.
And of course, there are spear-carrying charioteers, kneeling and standing archers, generals, lower-ranking officers.
It's a whole army.
It really is. And even within those ranks, there are variations.
Like when it...
Some have shin pads, different trouser lengths, and different types of armor depending on their role.
So every detail matters.
It does. And we can't forget about the terracotta horses that go with them.
Of course, the horse.
And here's something else to picture. All of this would have been incredibly colorful.
They were painted.
They were. And they used a wide range of pigments.
What kinds of pigments?
Well, they used ground precious stones.
Precious stones.
Yeah.
Wow.
And intensely fired bones to create white pigment.
Oh, wow.
They used iron oxide for a dark red cinnabar, for a bright red malachite, for green azurite, for blue.
That's a lot of color.
It is, and they used charcoal for black
Hmm.
and a really interesting pigment called Chinese purple.
Chinese purple.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
It is, so all of this color combined with those individual faces.
It would have been a sight to see.
It's a shame so much of the color flaked off.
It is. You really wish you could see them as they were originally meant to be seen.
It makes you wonder about the artists who created them.
It does.
And this level of realism, it's quite striking.
It is, especially for that period in China.
Yeah, it raises questions about possible outside influences.
Yeah.
Like what?
Well, early on, there's this art historian, German Hafner.
German Hafner.
Back in 1986, he suggested a possible link to Hellenistic art.
Hellenistic art.
Yeah. He thought the realism might have come from contact with the West.
So ancient Greece.
Right.
And did other scholars agree with him?
Some did, like the archaeologist Juan Kingbo.
Okay.
He pointed out similarities to later Central Asian statuary.
I see.
And Li Juzin suggested there might have been inspiration from ancient Greek sculptures and art.
So the idea of Western influence was out there.
It was, but there were also strong arguments against it.
What did they say?
Well, some pointed out the risk of a Eurocentric bias,
Makes sense.
and they said there wasn't enough solid evidence for a direct link to Greece.
So what's the prevailing thought now?
The archaeologist Zhang Weixing argued that there's no real evidence to support the Greek connection, and Raoul McLaughlin pointed out the big differences between the Terracota army and Greek sculpture.
In what way?
The techniques, the materials, the symbolism, it was all different.
So not a direct copy.
Not at all.
Interesting.
And Darrell Wilkinson made the point that naturalism wasn't unique to Greece.
He's right about that.
Yeah, he cited examples like the Moche culture in ancient Peru.
So the realism could have developed independently in China.
That's the general view now, that it was more of an indigenous Chinese development.
Fascinating.
It is now. Let's talk about how these figures were actually made.
Okay, how did they do it?
It must have been a huge logistical challenge.
I can only imagine.
Well, they were made in workshops
Workshop.
by government laborers and local craftsmen,
Okay.
and they used locally available materials.
Makes sense.
They made the heads, arms, legs, and torso separately.
So they were made in pieces.
Yeah, and then they assembled them.
Interesting.
And there's this theory that they might have modeled the figures on real soldiers. Yeah, in 2021, there were some morphological studies that showed a strong resemblance between the statues and modern people from that region.
So they could have used real soldiers as models.
That's what they're thinking.
That's incredible. How about the faces? How did they make so many different faces?
Well, they used molds.
molds.
Yeah, probably at least 10 different ones.
10 different molds.
And then they added individual features with clay.
It's like a combination of mass production and individual artistry.
It is. And there's even a theory about the legs.
What about the legs?
They think they might have made them in a way similar to how they made terracotta drainage pipes.
Like a kind of assembly line.
Exactly. It suggests they were making parts in bulk and then assembling them after firing.
That's really efficient.
And to add to that, they found inscriptions with the names of workshops on some of the pieces.
Names of workshops.
Yeah, it's like a very early form of quality control.
So they were keeping track of who made what.
It seems so.
Wow. The level of organization is impressive.
It is, but we can't forget about the human cost.
What do you mean?
Well, in 2003, they found a mass grave pit with the skeletons of necropolis workers.
Oh, that's sad.
It is. They found 121 skeletons,
121.
and most of them were men between 15 and 40 years old, with an average height of about 7 meters.
So young men, most.
It seems so, and DNA analysis showed they came from all over China.
From all over China.
Yeah, Han Chinese and various minority groups, with a lot of them from southern China.
It shows just how massive this project was.
It does. They mobilized labor from all over the empire.
It's a sobering thought.
It is now going back to the soldiers. They would have been armed, right?
Of course they were an army.
Well, what kind of weapons did they have?
Most of the figures originally held real weapons.
Real weapons.
Yeah, which would have made them look even more realistic.
But those weapons are mostly gone now, right?
Unfortunately, yeah, most of them were either looted or have rotted away over time.
So we've lost a lot of information about their weaponry.
We have, but archaeologists have still managed to recover over 40,000 bronze items, including swords, daggers, spears, lances, battle axes, crossbow triggers, and tons of arrowheads.
That's still a huge amount.
It is, and they often find the arrowheads bundled together in groups of 100.
Interesting.
Yeah, and by studying these arrowheads, they've found evidence of a really sophisticated production system.
What kind of system?
They call it cellular production.
Cellular production.
Some people have even compared it to modern manufacturing processes like the ones used in Toyota factories.
Wow. So advanced techniques from over 2,000 years ago.
It seems that way.
It's amazing. What about the preservation of these bronze weapons?
Well, for a long time, people thought they had been coated in chromium to prevent corrosion.
A chromium coating?
Yeah, but more recent research has shown that the chromium was probably just contamination from lacquer.
Oh, so not a deliberate preservation technique.
Probably not.
Interesting.
And it seems like the real reason they're so well preserved is because of the soil.
The soil.
Yeah, it's slightly alkaline, and the particles are very fine, which helps protect the bronze. And the swords themselves are actually made from a pretty complex alloy.
What kind of alloy?
Copper, tin, nickel, magnesium, and cobalt.
Wow, that's a lot of metals.
It is, and some of the swords even have inscriptions on them.
Inscriptions?
Yeah, and these inscriptions show that some of the swords were made before the first emperor's reign.
So they weren't all brand new?
No, some of them had already seen battle.
That's incredible.
It really connects you to the past.
It does. So the Terracota Army, it's such a unique find. Were there any similar examples before it?
You know, there are very few figurines known from before the Terracota Army.
Really?
So its style and scale, they really stand out something new.
Wow.
We do have some rare, small terracotta warrior figurines from the late Zhou dynasty.
Okay.
One example is the Terpo horse rider.
The Terpo horse rider?
Yeah. It's the earliest known depiction of a cavalryman in China.
Interesting.
This figure wears Central Asian clothing and might even be a foreigner.
Hmm.
But it doesn't have that same level of realism that you see in the Qin figures.
So there were figurines, but nothing on this scale.
Exactly.
Did this style continue in later dynasties?
Later dynasties did have terracotta armies in their tombs.
Yeah.
But they were generally much smaller and not as focused on the military.
I see.
The Qin emperor's preference for life-size sculptures, it was a pretty short-lived phase.
So the Terracota Army is really a one-of-a-kind discovery.
It is, and it's a pivotal moment in both art and history.
Absolutely. And scientific research is still revealing new things about it.
Oh, for sure.
Like what?
Well, a study in 2007 showed that the Chinese purple pigment,
Yeah.
they think it was probably a byproduct of Taoist alchemists trying to make jade.
Trying to make jade.
Yeah, it's a fascinating connection.
It is. And what about the research on the arrowheads?
The research on the arrowheads has been really insightful.
How so?
Well, it's confirmed that they use this sophisticated cellular production system.
Right.
And they've also found evidence that they were using lathes to polish the arrowheads.
Lathes?
Yeah, a tool for shaping wood or metal. So they had some pretty advanced technology back then.
They did. And what about the study on the facial features?
That study was interesting.
What did they find?
Well, they compared the faces of the warriors to modern Chinese populations, and they found no significant differences.
Wow. So the warriors might actually look a lot like people living in China today.
It's possible.
That's incredible.
It is, although there are some limitations to the study.
Like what?
Well, the figures might have deformed over time,
Right.
and populations changed, so it's not a perfect comparison.
Still, it's amazing how much we can learn from these figures.
It is science is constantly revealing new things.
Now, the impact of the Terracota Army has been felt worldwide, right?
Absolutely.
With all these exhibitions.
It's captured the imagination of people all over the globe.
So tell me about some of these exhibitions.
Well, the very first exhibition outside of China was in Melbourne, Australia, back in 1982.
Melbourne, 82.
And then the British Museum had a huge exhibition in 2007 and 2008.
I remember hearing about that.
It actually broke attendance records.
Wow.
And since then, there have been exhibitions in lots of different countries, Europe, North and South America, Australia.
It's a global phenomena.
It is.
You know, it's been said that the Terracota Army is one of the few historical artifacts that can draw massive crowds just based on its name.
Really?
Like the Titanic.
Wow.
And even replica exhibitions have been super popular.
It shows just how fascinated people are by this discovery.
It does.
It's really incredible.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key things you think our listeners should take away from this?
I think first and foremost, the sheer scale of the Terracota Army.
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands of life-size figures, each with its own unique features, all created for one emperor.
It's mind-blowing.
It is, and the mysteries surrounding its creation.
The possibility that they used real soldiers as models, the advanced manufacturing techniques.
Exactly.
It's also fascinating.
And of course, the fact that it still captivates people all over the world.
It speaks to its importance.
It does. It gives us a glimpse into ancient China like nothing else.
Absolutely.
It really does.
Now, you came here looking for knowledge that was both quick and thorough.
I did.
And I hope we've delivered that for you.
You have.
Great. Now for a final thought to ponder.
I'm ready.
Considering everything we've talked about, the scale, the detail, what do you think best reflects the ambition and mindset of Chen Shihuang?
The first emperor.
Yeah, what single aspect of the Terracotta Army really captures who he was?
That's a tough one.
It is. And what does this tell us about the link between power and legacy?
The desire to be remembered.
Exactly. It's something to think about long after we're done here.
It is. Thanks for the deep dive.
You got it. Thanks for joining me.